The mansion of the court mage Lemresh, specifically his main laboratory, was an absolute disaster zone. Our heroine stood in the center of a magic circle, wiping blood from the corner of her mouth with a napkin, but it was already too late. After countless experiments, the girl had once again become unusually pale, with heavy dark circles hanging under her eyes. She felt sorry for Xavier, who was counting on his fiancée to reverse time. To seize the throne, he needed to return to the past. Even His Majesty had always dreamed of this. Therefore, the prince relied on Jin Xia, the most powerful mage in the entire kingdom. But the heroine knew that reversing time was impossible. No one had ever succeeded. Yet her beloved insisted on it, gripping her shoulders tightly enough to cause her pain. They both knew what the others in the court thought of Xavier. For the sake of their happiness, he had to ascend the throne. The ruler of the Galen Empire, Emperor Tasku, had already acknowledged this illegitimate son as a member of the royal family. But he had not designated an heir, so the princes had started a veritable war behind his back for the throne. Janicia's fiancé was that very illegitimate son, and he needed her help to seize the crown. To the heroine herself, that kind of power meant nothing. But she couldn't bear to watch Xavier suffer because of his family. Her own family had all died of illness, and she, as an illegitimate daughter, had only been very lucky to survive. The prince sincerely hoped she would help him, and then they would soon be married. But the heroine had become extremely weak from attempting to interfere with time itself. However, if she succeeded this time, she believed she and the prince would surely be able to find a cure for her. She gathered her thoughts, stumbling weakly to her desk while pressing a napkin to her nose. Soon, her best friend came running to find her, not understanding why Jin Xia was still in the laboratory. The heroine froze. Lisbel was not allowed in here. Her friend wanted to go upstairs with her for a cup of hot tea. Later, in the living room of the Lemresh estate, she learned that the heroine was still researching that time travel spell. Looking at her pale skin and lifeless eyes, her friend realized that Jin Xia had become completely obsessed with her work. The heroine thought His Highness must be disappointed about this, as he hadn't come to see her in a long time. Lisbel decided not to take it to heart. After all, she was Galen's most famous mage, a role model for countless people. Jin Xia thanked her for her kind words, recalling that they had known each other for 10 years since their academy days. Her best friend thought she should finally acknowledge her own status and achievements. After finishing her tea, the girl didn't want to trouble her friend any further and decided to leave. Suddenly, the heroine caught a scent coming from Lisbel that felt very familiar. Her friend was surprised, thinking she had sprayed too much perfume, but Jin Xia simply recognized the fragrance. When she heard it was a perfume with the scent of dried roses, she was completely stunned. It was the exact same perfume Xavier had given his fiancée for her last birthday. He had said it was exclusively supplied to the royal family. So now, a disquieted Jin Xia wondered where her friend had gotten this perfume. Lisbel was bewildered by her expression, thinking the scent on her was too strong. She thought perhaps similar perfumes were sold elsewhere and felt happy that they liked the same scent. Hearing this, her friend was very pleased, immediately hugging Jin Xia and giving her a weary smile. After wishing her dear friend a good rest, the lady quickly left. Afterward, she quietly closed her eyes, thinking of that rose scent again. Whenever she smelled it, she would think of Xavier, the man who taught her how to love. And now, Lisbel also appeared in her mind, the best friend who had always supported her. Jin Xia knew she wouldn't have made it this far without them, and she was determined to make them proud of her. To do this, she needed to devote herself entirely to her research, so she buried herself at her desk until late at night. After some calculations, she finally figured out where she had gone wrong before. Thinking she would definitely succeed this time, she rushed to the laboratory to verify her theory. But as soon as she went down to the basement, she froze at the entrance. The door was ajar, but the light shining from inside was even more suspicious. She quietly approached the door and was horrified to see her fiancé and her best friend inside. The prince didn't understand why they had to go through so much trouble when they could have just stolen the witch's research notes directly. Meanwhile, as Lisbel stuffed the beakers from the table into a bag, she thought that would be too cruel. Jin Xia would be devastated if her research results were gone, and she doesn't have much time left anyway. Xavier felt she was being too kind to the protagonist and began to flirt with her passionately, saying he loved that scent of dried roses. It turned out she had sprayed the perfume while His Highness was still sleeping. The prince thought that a beauty like Li Spell wearing this perfume was much more fitting than Jin Xia. Unable to bear it any longer, she rushed into the laboratory, startling them so much that the research notes fell to the floor. She was completely bewildered, not knowing what these two were doing here. Trembling with tears from the hurt, she was shocked that they had not only stolen her research, but were also making out like animals. Xavier glared at her and retorted, "Who the hell are you calling an animal?" Jin Xia yelled back, unable to believe they would treat her this way after she had trusted them so much. In a fit of rage, she swore she would never forgive these two after suffering such betrayal. Consumed by anger, she went straight for Li Spell, grabbing her hair and causing her to scream repeatedly. However, a few seconds later, the heroine was struck hard on the jaw by a right hook from her fiancé. She went flying, her head hitting the corner of the table, and instantly lost consciousness. The table shook and the candles on it tipped over, igniting the papers and starting a raging fire. Xavier watched helplessly as the manuscripts burned and decided it was time to leave with his mistress. Meanwhile, the heroine slowly regained consciousness, feeling warm liquid flowing down her head and the taste of blood filling her mouth. When she saw Li Spell refusing to leave and walking toward her, a glimmer of hope flashed in Janicia's eyes. But to everyone's surprise, the lady picked up the research notes and smiled at her friend. After thanking the heroine for her dedication over the years and for this parting gift, the girl happily returned to Xavier's side. They turned and began to walk away, leaving the betrayed female mage in the midst of the blazing fire. Jin Xia collapsed to the ground in exhaustion, feeling her strength draining away bit by bit. The fire grew larger and kept closing in, but she refused to die here like this. Using the last of her strength, she propped herself up on her hands and knees, sensing a trace of magic still remaining in her body. Dipping her soot-blackened fingers in her own blood, she began to draw a magic circle on the floor. Although hope seemed slim now, she had at least tried to reverse time. The heroine was the illegitimate daughter of the Lemresh family, and her birth was seen as a curse. Her mother was a maid forced into a relationship with the Count, and that woman resented her daughter's very existence. Jin Xia was often beaten, her ears constantly filled with words like, "You would have been better off not being born." Her mother believed no one would love this girl, and that one day she would be used and abandoned. Later, a terrible plague swept through the entire Lemresh family in a short time. As the sole survivor, she inherited the title of Countess of Lemresh. Recalling the scene of her family's disease-twisted bodies being burned, Jin Xia knew deep down that her life had always been like hell. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over her, and the heat of the flames began to recede. Her head stopped throbbing, her eyes shut tight as if she were asleep, and then she heard a familiar voice. Feeling her strength returning, she stood up abruptly, filled with confusion. She was sitting at the desk in her laboratory, and the butler walked in. His name was Lance Million, and he was very worried that she had stayed up working all night again. Realizing she had truly returned to the past, Jin Xia needed to know today's date. The butler didn't understand what was wrong with her today, but quickly told her the date. It turned out she had returned to exactly 1 month before her engagement to Xavier. The girl wasn't even sure if the spell had succeeded, but her body had returned to normal. Fighting back tears, she realized she had really successfully cast the time-warping spell. Her laboratory was intact and looked unusually tidy. When she noticed her notes were also unharmed, Jin Xia was ecstatic. Suddenly, she remembered the faces of Li Spell and Xavier, who had betrayed and killed her. She pursed her lips in anger. The girl swore she would never forgive them for what they had done. The thought of the past made her sick, so to clear her head, she went for a walk in the garden. Hearing someone call her name, she immediately recognized that disgusting voice that made her want to vomit. The prince smiled as he greeted his future bride, happy to have run into her in the garden. He gently took her hand, but Jin Xia jerked back abruptly, pulling her hand away. Thinking it was just an accident, the prince cheerfully told her he had prepared a dress for the upcoming ball. But when she said she already had a dress, Xavier was completely stunned. Knowing she was usually much quieter, the prince wondered if he had inadvertently annoyed her. She said nothing, wanting to give him a piece of her mind, but she was so angry she couldn't even speak. Suddenly, the butler appeared, happy to have found his mistress. He quickly explained to His Highness that the young lady had been up all night for her research. Realizing he couldn't be bothered to appease her anymore, Xavier just smiled at her. Then he glared viciously at Lance, unable to understand how a butler dared to interrupt them. The prince raised his hand, wanting to punish this meddlesome servant. Just then, Jean Shia remembered the time he had slapped her hard across the face. So now, Xavier was about to do the same to Lance, who had done absolutely nothing wrong. She immediately stepped between them, shielding the butler, believing that touching her servant was tantamount to touching her. She just didn't understand. Was His Highness revealing his true nature so easily? She turned around and left with the butler, leaving the prince standing there, confused and shocked. She was exhausted today, and she knew Xavier could find his own way back. Upon returning to the manor, she confirmed Lance was okay, while also noticing Lisbel peeking at them from behind the bushes. She knew her friend used to be completely submissive to Xavier and couldn't figure out when she had become so formidable. Later, while pouring tea for his mistress, the butler learned that she was planning to cancel her engagement to the prince. She knew he would want to ask the reason for her decision, and she didn't know how to explain it to him. But Lance simply smiled upon hearing her words, fully understanding the countess's decision. He believed that, as the head of the Lemresh estate, she must always be vigilant. The problem was, gently rejecting His Highness wouldn't work. Lance thought perhaps she could set her sights on a young talent from a prominent noble family. But she knew that no matter who she ended up with, people didn't want her but the bloodline she carried. Furthermore, if the Emperor supported her and Xavier, no one would dare defy him or propose to her. She needed a foolproof reason to break the engagement, and the butler had only one person in mind. They were talking about Prince Callian, the second in line to the throne of Jiren, whose broken engagement was causing quite a stir. He had no interest in marriage, and rumors said he was very happy about the cancellation, which had thoroughly enraged the royal family. Now understanding why the royal family was so tense, Jean Shia felt this person might actually understand her. She took a satisfied sip of her tea, deciding to visit this second prince very soon. The next night, in the dead of silence, not even the sound of the wind could be heard. Someone silently pushed open the balcony door and slipped into Kalian's bedroom, leaving black footprints on the floor. The cloaked figure approached the bed, seeing the sleeping prince's head poking out from under the covers. He drew a dagger, grinning like a madman, and raised the dagger above the defenseless body. He plunged the knife straight into His Highness's back, the assassin naively believing his task to be complete. However, seeing no blood, he yanked the blanket back, only to find Kalian's clothes. The prince himself then stepped out from behind him, pointing his blade at the man's neck. First, the prince wanted to know exactly who had sent this killer into his bedchamber. Callian von Hynessa Jiren's patience was wearing thin, and the assassin had better confess right now. Later, Jane Shah arrived at the central hall of the Ministry of Magic. It was as crowded as ever, and she began scanning her surroundings the moment she entered. Court Mage Cedric Windsor spotted her from the entrance and immediately rushed over. He couldn't wait to ask her about the magical pulse they had discussed earlier. He handed her one of his research notebooks, wanting her to describe the pulse inside it. This puzzled the heroine. Was he really not worried that she might steal the research project contained within his notes? But Cedric was certain she would never do such a thing, and Lisbel, who had just walked over, agreed completely. She also believed Jane Shah would never do something so despicable. I mean, even at the academy, she was known for her kindness and honesty. And of course, she was even more renowned for her magical skills. The fake friend turned to the heroine, hoping she would agree with her words. Jane Shah simply glared at her coldly, deciding to say nothing. Her own mother had cursed her from birth, declaring that no one would ever love her. Everyone mocked and despised her, accusing her of bringing sickness upon her family in her quest to rise above others. Lisbel was the only one who had extended a hand to her, becoming a ray of sunshine in her life. But that beautiful image was nothing more than a false illusion. While being burned alive in that laboratory, she finally understood the truth. She saw the true face of this world. So now, she pulled her hand away from her fake friend, leaving Lisbel completely bewildered. Lisbel didn't understand what was happening and hoped Jane Shah could spare a moment. She wanted Jane Shah to cover a class for her, while she went to prepare Lord Cedric's documents. Jane Shah could have refused, but she happened to have a good idea. It turned out this was a lecture for the second prince, and luckily, the court mage agreed to collaborate with the heroine. When she accepted, Lisbeth was ecstatic, knowing she couldn't resist. She chuckled softly, thinking the heroine was truly such a good person. Just then, her alarm went off, and after saying goodbye, she hurried off to attend to her own business. Stepping onto the porch, she sprinted toward the meeting place, hoping she wasn't late. She had wasted too much time on those two, and the person she was meeting might have already left. Hiding behind a pillar, Lisbeth was relieved to see Xavier still there. She walked out to greet him, happily saying hello to His Highness, and he was equally pleased to see her. He was also very grateful for the embroidered handkerchief she had made for him, featuring his signature design. The girl's face flushed red, wondering if she had gone a bit overboard. However, the prince thought the handkerchief was beautiful and reminded him of his mother. He felt it was fate that they had met and hoped the lady could spare some time to accompany him. Sitting on a bench, listening to him recount his unpleasant encounter with Jane Shaw earlier, she feigned shock. Xavier was convinced the heroine was cold as ice toward him, as if she didn't need a prince like him at all. Lisbeth was completely stunned, realizing that what happened the other day wasn't her imagination. It seemed Jane Shaw had no idea how to behave in front of royalty. What annoyed the girl most was remembering how Jane Shaw used to show off Prince Xavier to her. Once, the heroine showed her a small box, a gift the prince had personally given her. To Jane Shaw, it meant he truly loved and cared for her, so Lisbeth decided she would steal him away from her forever. And now, she genuinely felt sorry for Xavier. He was so good to the heroine, yet was treated with such disdain. If she were in her friend's position, she would never be so obtuse and rude to him. Taking her hand, the prince asked aloud what the lady would do in such a situation. Lisbeth sighed charmingly, indicating she would be willing to do anything. His Highness asked. On the same day, in Prince Kalian's drawing room at the Winter Palace, Cedric and Jane Shaw were preparing for the lecture. The court mage decided to give the girl some advice. You must respect the second prince. He fights monsters at the border, and moreover, no one dies. Kalian returns unscathed. Because of this, many call him the incarnation of the devil, but the royal knights revere him as a top-tier swordsman. Suddenly, the doors swung open, and the prince strode into the drawing room, surrounded by a group of loyal servants. An order rang out for everyone to welcome His Highness, the second Prince of Gyron, and the protagonists bowed respectfully. Cedric introduced himself as today's lecturer, and Jane Shaw Lembrish as his assistant. The prince showed no reaction to their words, merely fixing the heroine with a cold stare. She smiled back, knowing this man was not an easy character to deal with, but he was exactly who she needed. The lecture began, and Cedric launched into a long discourse on the magical arts. The prince wasn't listening at all. He had lost count of how many people had tried to assassinate him and didn't know when it would ever end. Meanwhile, according to the court mage, Earth was the most difficult element to control. There were only 9 mages in the world capable of manipulating the earth element, and Lady Lembrish was one of them. Hearing this, the prince looked up, gazing thoughtfully at the heroine. To his surprise, Jane Shaw smiled and winked, pointing at something. Kalian was confused, but then realized she wanted him to look down. He glanced at the table in front of him, saw a book, and noticed a folded note tucked between the pages. After opening the note and reading its contents, he suddenly decided that was enough for today's lecture. He found the lesson very interesting and ordered Lady Lembrish to come with him immediately. She obeyed his command without a word, relieved that it wasn't as difficult as she had imagined. He stopped abruptly, and she slammed right into his back, knocking her glasses off. Kalian thought he could have ignored the note, but now he was backed into a corner. The prince was puzzled by the question she had posed on the paper. She asked if he was tired of all the assassination attempts. She smiled in return. Jane Shaw wanted to make a deal with His Highness. Picking up her glasses from the floor, she stated she could protect him from those assassination attempts. In return, she wanted to pretend that she and the prince were a couple. Kalian coughed awkwardly, completely failing to understand why she would choose him for this. It turned out it was all because he was a smart, cold-blooded, and ruthless guy. In other words, he was exactly the kind of person the lady was desperately looking for. The heroine wasn't interested in love or marriage, nor did she want others to exploit her magic. Instead, she just wanted to study magic and dedicate her life to it. She only hoped His Highness would protect her for 1 year. The prince still didn't understand how she planned to stop the impending assassinations. Hearing that she could predict assassinations with magic, the prince had considered this, but they had never given him a clear answer. However, the prince had never asked Jane Shaw this question directly. Before she turned back time, Kalyan had lost his right arm in an explosion. After surviving 167 assassination attempts, he finally went to the Ministry of Magic and ordered them to create a protective device for him. Back then, they were powerless, but now things would be completely different. Jane Shaw had personally crafted this magic ring she wanted to give him. When danger approached, it would glow a deep crimson. The prince had nothing to lose by accepting it, and the heroine hoped he would give her a chance. With that, she left him, and shortly after, his attendants walked in. The servants had overheard the entire conversation and thought the lady's proposal was highly suspicious. They felt mages were fundamentally untrustworthy, as they would stab you in the back at the first opportunity. The guards were ready to throw her out on the spot, but the orders they received were to follow her. There was not a trace of fear in her eyes, only determination. Moreover, there was a familiar feeling about this female mage that made the prince want to believe her. Besides, she was right that he had nothing to lose, so why not give it a try? Meanwhile, as Jane Shaw walked through the palace courtyard, she felt things weren't as terrible as she had imagined. At least this man actually listened to her, unlike those other hypocrites. Suddenly, Xavier and Lisbel appeared in front of her, startling her. It turned out the so-called friends had heard about her meeting with the second prince and had come specifically to see if she was all right. They had learned of the meeting from Cedric, who had accidentally bumped into them while completely freaked out. The prince didn't understand why everyone was still standing there, so he invited the friends to the gazebo. For tea, he decided to show off that he maintained the garden with magic, so blue roses bloomed there all year round. The court mages knew maintaining such a garden must cost a fortune, but according to the prince, money was no object. The heroine sipped her tea calmly, knowing this was pure nonsense, as Xavier spent all his money on himself. He was obsessed with shocking the world with his magnificent palace, completely forgetting about his territory. All of this led to serious financial problems, and in the end, the flashy prince proved to be a total fraud. The situation became so bad that he couldn't even pay his staff properly. Lisbel quietly kicked Xavier, then remarked that the magnificent palace spoke volumes about its owner's taste. She marveled at how lucky her precious friend was to have such a fiancé. Lisbel felt Jane Shaw was incredibly lucky and wished she could meet someone like His Highness. Hearing these words, Cedric suddenly jumped up and ran off, pretending to remember something important. The prince smiled, remembering that his future bride could control all four elements and was even a star at the academy. The lady, however, recalled her friend's student days, claiming her friend knew nothing but magic. All the other students were jealous of her and completely ignored her, so the girl was always alone. However, when she and Lisbel became friends, everything changed. Jane Shaw remembered overhearing a conversation between her friend and other students, who all asked, why was she hanging out with that witch? It turned out Lisbel just didn't want the heroine cursing everyone who upset her. Hearing that she was only being used for the greater good, Jane Shaw froze on the spot. Since then, she had felt her friend had ulterior motives, but she always chose to turn a blind eye. She knew she meant nothing to her, and Jane Shaw wasn't going to put up with this crap anymore. The heroine remembered how they always did experiments together, and how Lisbel struggled with various transformations. The lady always had friends she could turn to, but she never did. Jane Shaw was happy to know that at the academy, she was the only one who could help her friend. Even though a few classmates thought the witch was just wasting her time, she smiled, took a sip of tea, and bet Lisbel still remembered them. She was talking about the two men she was dating simultaneously. The girl turned pale with shock and embarrassment, stood up abruptly, slammed her hand on the table, and said it wasn't true. She gave a nervous, dry laugh, arguing that their relationships barely overlapped and Jane Shaw must be mistaken. She was trembling, unable to believe the heroine would say such a thing in front of His Highness. The heroine smiled triumphantly and quickly pretended she must have remembered incorrectly. The prince thought everyone makes mistakes and invited the ladies for a walk in the garden. He and his future bride walked ahead, while Lisbel followed behind them like a lost puppy. She gritted her teeth in anger, unable to believe Jane Shaw would treat her this way. The heroine walked with her head held high, clearly having completely forgotten her place. So, the lady decided she needed to remind her dear little friend just how worthless she was, firmly believing Jane Shaw could never surpass her. Back in the day, During an alchemy class, Lisbel's potion suddenly exploded. Everyone immediately began to sympathize with her and blamed the whole thing on our heroine, calling her a complete failure. Everyone remembered she supposedly brought sickness to the family, thinking Janesha deliberately broke that girl's test tube. But our heroine had only kindly suggested she shouldn't mix those specific potions. But every time she offered such advice, Lisbel felt her friend was belittling her, so she insisted on doing the opposite. Suddenly, that young lady jumped out to defend her again, insisting Janesha didn't mean to do it. That was when our heroine realized her so-called friend was trying every method to make her miserable. And right now, she probably wanted revenge for the heroine bringing up those men during the tea party with the prince. The heroine put a hand on her shoulder, about to say something, but Janesha suddenly pulled her hand back. Lisbel twisted her ankle, fell flat on her face in front of her, and then scrambled up on all fours. The heroine discovered a half-faded magic rune beneath her and was completely stunned. She thought, no way, isn't this the very spell the prince was showing off? As soon as the thought crossed her mind, the rune flickered and all the blue roses Xavier had been drooling overturned into ordinary red ones. Seeing this, our male lead was terrified, his face turning as pale as a sheet. Lisbel was scared out of her wits by his reaction and quickly jumped up to try and explain. The heroine walked over to her, not wanting His Highness to pressure the girl. She surely didn't do it on purpose. She smiled at her hypocritical friend, hoping this really was just an accident. The prince absent-mindedly said it was no problem, and Janesha knew he would understand. Lisbel had nothing to worry about. After all, there's nothing money can't solve. The prince has plenty of money, and the heroine bet he could repair the rune in a few days. She laughed, thrilled that things were progressing so smoothly. When he was left alone with Lisbel, Xavier remembered she had said she would do anything for him, and right now, he truly hoped this wasn't the anything she meant. She was terrified by his words, screaming that the whole thing was ridiculous and purely a misunderstanding. I mean, even if you think about it, how could a rune be erased so easily? She was convinced Janesha had framed her. This was all her doing. The prince yelled back, saying her words were pure nonsense. That clumsy idiot would never be despicable to that extent. Suddenly, a terrible thought struck Lisbel, reminding her that the heroine had been acting strangely lately. It was like she was a completely different person, which gave her the creeps. Remembering how Janesha had suddenly rejected his advances, the prince had to agree with the young lady's view. To help him find out the truth, Lisbel planned to tail her friend at the Ministry of Magic and report any abnormalities. She hoped Xavier would entrust this matter to her, as she would take the job seriously. Looking at her, the prince couldn't help but recall an incident from a few months ago. At the time, there was a grand banquet at the palace, and the hall was packed with people. Seeing Janesha there, he thought, how is this country bumpkin here? How did she get in? Just seeing her made Xavier lose his appetite, even though he was holding a glass of fine wine. Noticing him staring at the girl, a certain noble assumed His Highness had a keen eye for talent. It turned out that unremarkable lady was the youngest and strongest among the court mages. Most mages can only manipulate one of the four elements. But guess what? To everyone's shock, the heroine had mastered all the elements simultaneously. She didn't even need magic stones to draw runes, and she had crafted a wooden prosthetic limb for that lord. Hearing she was a prodigy and a star in the magical world, Xavier realized she was exactly the person he needed. The emperor had decided that he would only name this illegitimate son his heir if he could find a way to send him back to the past. And clearly, Janesha Lambresh was the one who could help him reverse the clock. So now, he gladly accepted Lisbel's proposal to spy on the heroine and see what exactly she was up to. He grabbed the girl's hands, ready to trust her completely, but just this once. Meanwhile, the heroine was humming a cheerful tune, skipping her way to her laboratory. She had only needed to make a slight adjustment to the room beforehand, and everything went seamlessly. She felt a great sense of relief, then suddenly noticed someone at the entrance of the research center. A hood obscured the guy's face. Janesha didn't know what he wanted, so she walked straight toward the stranger. The guy grinned, feeling he had come to the right place, then turned to her and pulled down his hood. In that moment, the heroine was stunned. She recognized him immediately and became flustered. The visitor was none other than Manuel Sieta, with golden hair and golden eyes, a member of the Academy's junior combat team who was incredibly excited about this long-awaited reunion. Later, she sat at the same table with him, gave him some ice cream, and learned that the second prince had sent him to spy on her, which was quite ridiculous. The deal she proposed to Kalyan was indeed a bit whimsical, and he wanted to know if she had ulterior motives. Only vetted mages could enter the Ministry of Magic, and our young lad here was the only spellcaster by the second prince's side. Of course, she didn't expect him to believe her immediately, but what spy would directly reveal their true motives like this? Certainly not. That's not how things work. Usually, Manuel shouldn't have been discovered at all. But he felt she was different, so he confessed his doubts to his boss. Kalyan allowed him to confide in Jane Shah, but on the condition that he must report everything to him, down to the smallest detail. Hearing this, the heroine knew it was a perfect opportunity to prove her worth. She decided to confess that she was currently researching restoration magic, though Manuel knew no one had ever succeeded before. But then, right before his eyes, Jane Shah restored the ice cream he had just eaten. Strictly speaking, it wasn't restoration, but time displacement, something she realized while performing self-teleportation. He was won over by her talent and the creativity to come up with such a thing. Not all mages could do this, so she hoped her old friend would put in a good word for her with his lord. He looked at her with a smile, realizing she was just as amazing as ever. Later, Manuel learned that thanks to Lord Windsor, she had quickly transferred apartments. Meanwhile, Jane Shah noticed the sword he was carrying and learned that he was training with a one-of-a-kind swordmaster, Kalyan. Realizing the level of respect he held for his highness, she mentally compared him to a puppy full of love for its master. But beyond that prince, he also held sincere respect for her, which caught her a bit off guard. She remembered his older brother, Lopez, was the pride of the Sieta family. Living in his brother's shadow, Manuel had been super quiet, even a bit gloomy, at the academy. It turned out he was actually quite cheerful. Now he was curious why Jane Shah didn't just use magic to cure her eyesight. The glasses didn't bother her, and she didn't understand the question, but it turned out the guy just wanted to see what she looked like without them. Seeing her face turn bright red, he decided they should probably go get something to eat. The next moment, they appeared in the Ministry of Magic's cafeteria, and Jane Shah decided to treat her spy friend to a meal. She piled his plate high with various meat dishes, wanting him to eat well and recover his strength. But before they could even start, Lisbelle appeared holding a plate of salad. The protagonist was quite surprised by her appearance, assuming the girl would stay far away from her after the garden incident. Lisbelle was confused why her friend had started eating without waiting for her, and was also surprised to see the man beside her. She grinned like a Cheshire cat, wondering if Prince Xavier knew his fiancée was having lunch with another man. Jane Shah didn't even bat an eyelid. She stuffed a piece of meat into her mouth, deciding she simply didn't care. Lisbelle was completely baffled by her response, unable to understand why she was being so rude. After greeting the young lady, Manuel Sieta quickly clarified that from now on, he would be assisting Lady Lambresh. Lisbelle also introduced herself and decided she was an assistant too, and since he was younger than Jane Shah, she would treat him like a younger brother. But he suggested that since they were both assistants, perhaps they should keep things professional between them. Hearing that Lord Lopez Sieta had impeccable manners, the girl didn't dare hold the same view of his younger brother. Manuel thought if she wanted to curry favor with the Sieta family, she'd have better luck with his brother, who was easier to get along with. And one more thing, her thick skull needed to understand that she should show some respect to his lord. Lisbelle was only being pleasant to that jerk because he was a Sieta, even though it made her blood boil. Besides, she had barely eaten anything lately. What right did Jane Shah have to gorge herself like that? The girl smiled and told her friend she felt eating like that would make one gain a lot of weight. Deciding salad was a better choice, she dumped the contents of her own plate onto Janesh's plate. She had intended to keep it for herself, but was willing to share with her friend. Just then, a knife flew past her face and slammed into the table, startling Lisbelle. Seeing her behave like that, he completely lost all respect for the Kendall family. From now on, she had better understand that leftovers were always reserved for slaves. So, they decided to leave the young lady's food on the table and go grab a bite in the lab. As Manuel left, he thought Lisbelle really needed to learn how to behave in public. After grabbing some sandwiches, they sat down at the lab table, and he apologized for his earlier outburst. He also discovered that she had proposed to the second prince solely because of his status. He felt both ashamed and regretful that he wasn't someone she could turn to for help. So he decided to do everything in his power to ensure she could seal the deal with His Highness. Later, Manuel brought the latest surveillance report to his boss. He managed to uncover that Jane Shah wanted to reject Prince Xavier before he could even propose. As for himself, having known her since their academy days, he believed Lady Lambresh was a wonderful person, both inside and out. Furthermore, of all the mages, Manuel respected Jane Shah the most. The second prince enjoyed these sweet words, hoping reality would live up to such praise. Just then, a maid knocked and entered, bringing some wine for His Highness. She was hiding a knife behind her back, and at the same time, the ring on Kalian's finger began to glow a deep crimson. Remembering what the heroine had said, he immediately ordered Manuel to seal all the doors. Hearing there were hired assassins here, the maid was completely at a loss. The prince smiled, drew his sword, and ordered them to tell Jane Shah their deal was on, and he would visit shortly. Lisbel was always the center of attention, while everyone thought the heroine was a total failure. Taking advantage of this, she appeared even more radiant beside her friend, receiving countless admirers and gifts. Jane Shah would also give her any magical item she desired, as long as she asked. Once, the girl hinted to her friend the new tailor shop had opened near the Lambresh estate. A few days later, Lisbel received a huge pile of new dresses from her as a gift. To be honest, before the heroine appeared, she thought the heroine was a nobody, but now she was going too far, and this girl didn't intend to play the nice person anymore. Now Lisbel wasn't satisfied with just stealing Prince Xavier. She wanted to go a step further. She planned to take everything away from her friend, leaving her no choice but to crawl back. Hearing from her that Manuel Sieta had become Janesha's assistant, the prince was extremely confused. He couldn't understand it. Had the heroine changed her feelings for him because of another man? But he didn't care, because a pathetic noble was nothing compared to royalty. So now, he wanted to hear all the news again, rethink everything, and then make his move. Meanwhile, Jane Shah was ecstatic to learn that His Highness Kalian had agreed to the deal. She felt she couldn't have done anything without Manuel, but he was convinced it was her ring that had won the prince's favor. When they heard a knock on the door, they assumed it must be the second prince. But then, a loud voice rang out, announcing the arrival of Prince Xavier and his wish to see Lady Lambresh. She had absolutely no idea what he wanted and was caught off guard by his sudden visit. She went to meet him, and a large crowd of onlookers gathered, buzzing with gossip about the marriage. Jane Shah couldn't possibly be his bride unless she had slipped a love potion into his tea, or what? After greeting His Highness, she had to know what brought him all this way. To her surprise, Xavier didn't answer but simply dropped to one knee, gazing affectionately into her eyes. He pulled out a ring box, preparing to propose and ask her to be his wife. Hearing him vow to make her happy for the rest of her life, Janesia began to tremble violently. She felt dizzy, unable to comprehend why this was all happening so fast. In the beginning, she had foolishly believed his words, giving him everything and more. But Xavier had ultimately abandoned her without hesitation, breaking her heart. So now, she could not accept His Highness's ring, for she only wanted to marry for love. This confession caught the prince off guard, and he just stared at Janesia, completely stunned. The heroine decided to clarify that not only did she not love him, but his love wasn't genuine either. She turned calmly to leave, hoping he wouldn't do this again, but this thoroughly enraged Xavier. The prince thought she shouldn't belittle his feelings for her, and stated that he already knew. She had a secret lover. His words left her completely bewildered, unable to understand a thing, but Lisbel thought she should stop acting. Like His Highness, this girl knew what Miss Lembrush was up to behind the prince's back, and as her friend, she could no longer remain silent. Hearing that she was secretly hooking up with a lord's brother and playing the noble Xavier for a fool, Janesia felt utterly confused. The crowd immediately began attacking the heroine for juggling two men and threw their full support behind Lisbel. They didn't understand. Those men only pursued her for what she possessed, and everyone would be happy if Janesia finally paid the price for her messy affairs. The fake friend expected an apology, but our girl simply said she had feelings for another man and that they were already engaged. Furthermore, Prince Xavier had never even courted her, so how could she betray someone she wasn't even dating? Besides, His Highness was practically begging her for a chance. That could hardly be called courting, right? Hearing these words, Xavier went mad with rage, screaming as he swung at the shameless woman. Callian blocked the blow, demanding his stepbrother explain himself. He couldn't believe this idiot dared to lay a hand on his fiancée, which took Xavier by surprise. He thought the second prince was a total jerk and recalled chasing Miss Limbrush for a whole month without ever seeing her with the second prince. Discovering that he was actually stalking his fiancée, Callian flew into a rage and began advancing on the prince. Terrified by his stepbrother, Xavier demanded the heroine tell the truth. The second prince also stepped forward, wanting Genesia to tell everyone about the first time they met. Specifically, she had to show the ring in front of everyone and call him by his name. The heroine knew she had no choice but to tough it out. She showed everyone the ring, pretending they met at Cedric's lecture and that Callian had confessed to her that very same day. According to him, it was love at first sight, and fate had brought them together. Xavier's face twisted in shock at what he was hearing. Equally composed, Liz Bell was stunned. She hadn't expected this cold-blooded jerk to fall in love at first sight. Callian himself remained poised, using his entire aura to show that things were exactly as stated. Later, sitting opposite him in the carriage, Genesia told His Highness how truly grateful she was. It turned out Manhwa had tipped him off, allowing the second prince to arrive just in time. Moreover, they agreed to drop the formalities so she could call him by his name. They were heading to the Limbrush estate to get her things, and then the two of them would go to the Winter Palace together. Genesia hadn't expected this at all and asked why. He then reminded her of her promise to protect him from assassination, which basically meant they would be together for a whole year. She certainly remembered her promise, but she didn't feel this was entirely necessary. So Callian wondered if she knew when people were usually most vulnerable and let their guard down. Without thinking, she felt it was during meals. But according to the second prince, it was when people were sleeping, so Genesia had to protect him then as well. Hearing that they would be sharing a bed, she knew exactly what he was getting at. So our girl decided to ask bluntly, what if she hogged the blanket while sleeping? Her question left Callian completely stunned, wondering if she was playing some kind of trick. But hogging the blanket? He hadn't expected that at all. He chuckled to himself, finding his bride far more interesting than he had initially imagined. Reports confirmed she was a top-tier mage, but in other aspects, she was incredibly clumsy. He decided to get back to business, recalling that a royal consort should be well-versed in poetry, history, and philosophy. Furthermore, she needed to be a master swordsman, a first-rate rider, and know all the proper etiquette. Basically, she had to reach a level comparable to royalty, and the training would begin the moment Genesia arrived at the Winter Palace. They used this as an excuse to bring her there, but for our girl, all of this was completely uncharted territory. However, Callian believed she was the smartest mage in the entire empire, so she could master it all within a few days. Genesia knew he was just comforting her and decided to give it her all. The prince felt they needed to act more naturally when together, so people would believe they were deeply in love. Soon, they arrived at the gates of the Limbrush estate, where the butler was already waiting. To her surprise, Callian intended to escort his bride all the way into the house. As she stepped out of the carriage with him, she imagined the look on Lance's face when he discovered all this. Once outside, he thoughtfully extended his hand, hoping she would take it. Genesia blushed as she took his hand, and the prince respectfully led her forward. Seeing this, Lance froze in place, completely stunned, hardly daring to believe his eyes. Inside the house, she pulled him aside, hoping he would help her pack after she explained everything. They didn't have much time, and the butler had something he wanted to give her. Miss Limbrush wanted the list of 105 mages selected by the Magic Tower. The Artier Guild requested more funds to thoroughly investigate 3 mages on the list. Genesia trusted the Artier Guild, ordered that they be given more money, and told them she would personally give them a bonus. Lance dutifully agreed, though he still didn't understand why all this was necessary. It turned out his mistress was just being herself, and now she was engaged to the second prince. But she also dreamed of joining the Magic Tower, and once all this was over, she would dedicate her life to magic. The butler had long noticed a change in her, and now it was obvious. His cherished mistress had truly become a beautiful young lady. Meanwhile, She was fully aware that things wouldn't always be smooth sailing. Sometimes you have to face difficulties, and sometimes you have to solve problems on your own, and Janasia didn't want to take shortcuts anymore. That evening, the protagonist's carriage finally stopped at the gates of the Winter Palace. They were greeted by His Highness's personal assistant and head butler, Rupert Bolton. After a formal welcome, he suddenly locked eyes with the distinguished guest, staring at her sternly. This caught the heroine completely off guard. She definitely hadn't expected this, and was at a total loss. According to the prince, from that moment on, Rupert would be her personal assistant. After ordering the butler to show her around, Callian also wanted him to start tutoring her from tomorrow. Janasia already suspected Rupert didn't like her, but when she saw the mountain of books on the desk, she was sure of it. He hoped the heroine wouldn't remain silent if she had any problems. Furthermore, he was ready to report her condition to his master at any time. Janasia had been treated worse in the past, so this didn't scare her, but she didn't understand why he was so hostile from the start. Did he despise her just because she was an illegitimate daughter like everyone else? Thinking that she and the prince would part ways in a year, she wondered if the butler was being too harsh. As it turned out, the guy didn't fully trust her yet because not everyone knew about the assassination attempts on His Highness. It was then that Janasia realized this had nothing to do with her. He was just worried about Callian. It seemed there were many people who cared about His Highness. She completely understood his hesitation, and honestly, if she were in his shoes, she would do the same. But she needed the prince now, and she genuinely hoped he would live a long and happy life. Besides, she had promised to give her all here, so Janasia intended to prove herself right now. She made up her mind not to leave that office until she had mastered all those books. After hours of hard study, her soul was practically leaving her exhausted body. While the butler was still in shock at the sight, she was overjoyed that she had actually answered all the questions correctly. She wanted to relax before the next lesson, but she still didn't know where her bedroom was. Long story short, the prince appeared in person, scooped the sleeping beauty into his arms, and carried her to her room. Waking up to see him, she was completely caught off guard, while Callian simply thought she must be exhausted. Janasia thought she was dreaming. She had memorized 40 books, so, yes, she was worn out. Our male lead felt Rupert's training was excessive and planned to go lecture him. But surprisingly, the heroine defended the butler, saying he was just too worried about his master. The prince still didn't know how she had learned about the assassination attempt. It turned out she knew he had sought help from the Ministry of Magic. Now, lying in bed, Janasia was very jealous of Callian for having so many people who cared about him. The heroine thought that if someone treated her like that, she would be happy enough to fly. Our male led tucked her in, took off her glasses, and noticed for the first time how beautiful the young lady was. At breakfast, the prince scrutinized his fiancée and decided to send Manhwa to the Ministry of Magic to get her the day off. He knew she had studied late into the night and felt she needed a break. He even mentioned canceling the tailor's appointment for her, but this only earned him a confused look. She suddenly remembered Rupert saying the tailor would come today as part of her training. Callian felt that since she was engaged to a prince, her attire should befit her status. Recalling past ridicule, she blurted out that she had never been interested in fashion. The guy was completely baffled by her reaction, thinking he had said something wrong. He immediately apologized for his rudeness, saying he didn't think her taste was bad at all. Janasia hadn't meant to say those words out loud, but they had slipped out, and now she felt extremely embarrassed. Despite all the rumors about the terrible second prince, Callian was actually very kind and considerate. She knew he wasn't the type to intentionally humiliate others. Later, they met two seamstresses who greeted the young lady warmly. Their boutique only made exquisite, elegant handmade dresses and was the best in the entire empire. It was a great honor for the ladies to show her some of their work, so they led her to see the gowns they had brought. Meanwhile, Rupert brought his master some important documents that required his immediate attention. Knowing he was busy, Janasia followed the ladies to the fitting room. The huge fitting room was filled with gorgeous clothes, expensive shoes, and sparkling accessories. The seamstresses surrounded her, taking her measurements with lightning speed. Additionally, with her permission, they quickly removed the young lady's glasses. Seeing her eyes without glasses, the ladies thought she was like a diamond in the rough, and the world's perception of her desperately needed correcting. Janasia was completely stunned. No one had ever complimented her like that before. A while later, the ladies brought our girl before His Highness, apologizing for the slight delay. The young lady's amethyst eyes paired with that lake green dress were simply breathtaking. That image was forever branded in Kalian's memory, planting a burning love in his heart. Janasia didn't know why His Highness had fallen silent. Without her glasses, everything before her was a blur. The seamstresses were the most shocked of all, as they hadn't even had time to properly dress her up yet. Kalian decided to let her try on one more gown, and soon enough, he beheld a transformed look that resembled an angel. After changing into yet another outfit, the tailors were racking their brains. How could someone look so perfect in absolutely everything? After trying on a few more dresses, our girl couldn't take it anymore and decided to call it quits. Just then, the prince decided to buy every single dress they had brought, even the ones she hadn't tried on yet, which left the butler completely baffled. Rupert racked his brain, but couldn't figure it out. His Highness had never cared about fancy clothes or trinkets before. Janasia felt there was no point in having so many dresses, especially since she didn't even know if they would look good on her. Kalian responded with a smile, thinking she would look good in anything. Her cheeks flushed crimson as she remembered he seemed to be busy with something. It turned out he was handling matters for the upcoming tournament. She suddenly realized what it was. She remembered that it was the grandest celebration in the entire empire, held every 2 years. Last time, due to Kalian's accident, Prince Jurgen had taken first place and the Mage Nia had taken second. But what was truly shocking was that Xavier had taken third place. Janasia felt curious. Who decided the order of appearance for the tournament? Moreover, she had assumed the explosion back then was just an accident, but what if someone had intentionally wanted to kill the second prince? When she heard that all the princes drew lots according to their age groups, she decided to draw on his behalf. It was all to protect him. Looking at her, Kalian was ready to entrust his life to his bride. It turned out the drawing of lots was today, so she and the prince headed to the main palace together. Walking down the corridor, she couldn't understand why the Empire's central palace was so damn cold. According to the second prince, this coldness was created by magic, intended to slow down the decay of bodies. He decided they would leave immediately after drawing the lots, and Janasia had absolutely no objections to that. As it turned out, the other princes had already arrived and were waiting in the drawing room. Walking inside, they saw the third Prince Vicus, the fifth Prince Season, and the first Prince Jurgen. Additionally, the fourth Prince Xavier was also present, and he immediately locked eyes with the new arrivals. Holding hands, our girl walked calmly toward the group, able to feel the tension permeating the air. Seeing her unease, Kalian gave his bride a knowing look, wanting to protect her at all costs. Jurgen happily greeted his dear brother and was also pleased to meet his bride. He thought to himself that the hero's taste in women had changed. His current fiancée was much duller than Lady Tarek. Janasia didn't understand why he was staring at her, while the first prince wondered if they were missing something. Kalian, fed up with his antics, grabbed his brother's head and slammed it violently into the floor. Jurgen seemed to have completely forgotten how much the hero hated people insulting his people. Before the first prince could recover from the shock, Vicus jumped up in anger and started yelling at Kalian. The second prince glared at him, ordering him to watch his filthy mouth. Frozen by his gaze, both princes fell into a fearful silence, their faces pale as paper. Watching them leave, Xavier mocked the idiots who had sought trouble by provoking Kalian. He sighed, glancing at the second prince, wondering if Jurgen had any idea who he was messing with. This was the guy who could let the heroine leave the Ministry of Magic without batting an eye. Suddenly feeling his gaze, the fourth prince flinched as if electrocuted. Meanwhile, since the first and third princes had left, the chamberlain decided to draw the cards for them. But just then, Janasia decided she wanted to get involved too and draw the lot for her husband. The servant was clearly unhappy about this, but he had no choice. So, smiling, he invited her to the table. On the table lay a stack of cards that determined the order of the ball, so she had to pick one. The heroine reached out toward the table, secretly using magic to peek at all the cards. To her shock, all the cards were exactly the same. Remembering that the explosion would happen during the ball, and realizing this was all rigged, she made up her mind about which card to take. But the moment she touched the cards, she clumsily knocked them off the table. In that instant, the chamberlain's face twisted in terror, and he froze completely. Janasia looked at him with a hint of a sneer at the corner of her mouth, while outwardly acting terribly embarrassed by her clumsiness. Almost all the cards had flipped over, and everyone saw the numbers on them, followed by a silence of extreme tension. The servant was completely at a loss, and our girl concluded there was definitely foul play involved. The Chamberlain looked at her in horror, realizing someone had thoroughly set him up. Janesia feigned surprise at his reaction. She hadn't even hinted that he had arranged the cards this way. She knew someone had enough power to even bribe the Chamberlain, and that person was none other than the first Prince Jurgen, the Queen's heir. The heroine gave a stern look. He thought suspecting him was equivalent to suspecting the prince himself. Pulling off his eye patch, Prince Season told the Chamberlain to stop talking nonsense, because his magic I had already seen through everything. The young hero's Eye of Truth was a third-tier artifact capable of seeing through any lie. In reality, that wasn't the case. The servant just hoped the kid would stop messing around. Knowing Season was just playing with a popular toy, Janesia hatched a plan. She showed great respect for this sacred relic, hoping His Highness would let her try it out. She put on the eye patch, pretending she could suddenly see through everything, saying it was indeed a legendary artifact. She was completely improvising, claiming to see a giant shield decorated with flower petals behind the Chamberlain. Everyone knew that shield was the pattern on Prince Jurgen's crest, so they all concluded he had manipulated the drawing. The servant couldn't understand how she had discovered all this and began to doubt if the toy actually worked. The Chamberlain knelt before the lady, sincerely hoping they wouldn't report him to His Majesty. The second prince drew his sword, thinking his fiancée needed to return to the Winter Palace first. The heroine decided to leave the servant for her fiancé to deal with, and quickly excused herself from the drawing room. Later, she went to the Winter Palace's greenhouse to clear her head. It all seemed too easy, but the switch cards would have given Jurgen an advantage, yet he wouldn't gain anything from the explosion. Therefore, Janesia felt she was missing something important. Manuel suddenly appeared before her, happily greeting the heroine. He guessed she might want to get back to work immediately, so he decided to remind her that the Ministry of Magic was currently a mess. Janesia immediately assumed Lisbel had messed something up again, but it was actually something else entirely. Besides, after that incident, that girl had immediately transferred to another department. The male lead was more worried about the reporters Lady Tarek had sent to the Ministry of Magic. She was Prince Callion's former fiancée and seemed to be holding a grudge. The protagonist knew the woman wasn't entirely in the wrong, but it still annoyed her. Lady Tarek's goal was to ruin the second prince's reputation before the inauguration ceremony began. If Janesia went back to work, all the reporters would pounce on her, and rumors would fly. Moreover, at the inauguration ceremony, she would definitely run into Callion's ex. After thanking Manuel for the information, she decided to prepare seriously for it. She also discovered that, fortunately, Cedric was actually in quite a good mood. Janesia had thought he would be depressed because Lisbel transferred apartments. She had assumed the court mage had some hidden feelings for the lady, but perhaps not. Knowing it might be a bit abrupt, the heroine wanted to ask about other matters regarding the inauguration ceremony. Manuel blushed furiously, about to invite the heroine to dance. He knew the second prince would have the first dance with her, but he hoped that after that, she would still have the energy to dance one with him. Guessing he had no one else to invite, Janesia fully understood, as she had never danced with anyone at her graduation ball either. Back then, Lisbel had offered fake sympathy while being swamped with countless dance invitations. But according to that fake friend, Janesia didn't need to worry at all because she was Xavier's fiancée. After all, not wanting him to suffer the same fate, the heroine happily accepted his invitation. Furthermore, she was determined to perfect her dancing skills. As it turned out, dancing was much harder in practice than in theory, and Janesia regretted not participating in more events. While practicing that evening, she accidentally twisted her ankle and started to fall. A split second later, she fell into Callion's arms, who seemed to appear out of thin air. The male lead felt she was being too impatient, so he held her waist and began to dance with her. Under his guidance, the heroine suddenly found herself getting the hang of it. She was terrified of embarrassing the second prince at the ceremony with her clumsy steps. In exchange for keeping the card-switching incident a secret, the Chamberlain had persuaded the Emperor to remake the cards. In addition to that, Jurgen also had his mother send Janesia a personal gift. This meant that if anyone dared to make fun of the heroine at the ceremony, it would be tantamount to insulting the queen. Callion did everything he could to ensure his bride could fully enjoy the celebration. The day before the grand event, she cured her eyesight with magic, and then the tailors arrived. This time, Janesia wanted them to do her makeup to the point where she was unrecognizable. Tonight was the ball, right before the tournament. Xavier was excited about Colleen exposing Jurgen's cheating because, as the prize for their silence, the first prince had promised each of them a favor. Suddenly, he saw the second prince and Janesia walk into the ballroom. He and everyone else were stunned by the girl's breathtaking nobility. Queen Theodora was also impressed by her elegance and complimented the heroine's appearance. When her gaze turned to His Majesty, Janesia flinched, completely startled. The emperor had no magic, yet he looked much younger than he should have and exuded an eerie aura. Colleen turned her toward him, wanting her to calm down and rely on him for support. They began to dance, and soon the heroine realized her heels were too high. He had hoped she could sit down after their dance, but she already had a dance promised to Manuel. So he let her step on his feet, thinking she could relax completely and just pretend to be dancing. They were so close now that Janesia worried Colleen would hear her pounding heart. Watching them dance, the guests all thought the couple should just head straight for the altar. Meanwhile, Lisbelle was gnashing her teeth on the sidelines, mad with jealousy. Her friends Meg and Selena were equally shocked by her audacity and decided to help her out. The ladies planned to deal with the heroine when she went to the restroom, while Lisbelle could take the opportunity to attract Callion's attention. People used to think the emperor had forced the second prince to be with the witch, but now it seemed those rumors were nonsense. Suddenly, the heroine overheard the ladies whispering that she was just using Colleen, just like she had used Xavier. Other ladies joined in, convinced that Janesia had been a heartbreaker back at the academy and that the second prince had likely coerced her. As she walked over to confront them, she suddenly spotted Selena in the crowd. In her past life, she, Meg, and Lisbelle had spared no effort in bullying the heroine at the academy. Janesia would absolutely not let them slander Colleen now. First of all, she needed to make it clear that she had zero interest in the fourth Prince Xavier. Furthermore, she was completely in love with the second prince who had proposed to her. Selena's spreading lies about them was an insult to both her and Colleen. So, from now on, she needed to watch her mouth. Janesia expected some kind of response, but the lady just turned and walked away. Hearing that she had done all this for him, our male lead was shaken by her unpredictability. He glanced at Xavier, only to see burning hatred and jealousy in his eyes. Knowing people still believed in her romance with the fourth prince, Colleen decided to return the favor of her defense and gently kissed her hair. Janesia tried her best to calm her racing heart and felt the need to visit the ladies' room. As soon as she walked in, Meg and Selena greeted her with excessive enthusiasm. Back at the academy in her past life, they had heard from Lisbelle that this girl spoke ill of them behind their backs. Janesia had done nothing of the sort, but these ladies simply wouldn't believe her and constantly insulted her. Yet now, these women actually thought she was qualified to join their noble ladies club. Fine, if that was the case, our heroine demanded a thorough apology for all the rotten things they had done to her back then. Meg completely lost her mind, unable to believe that this person who stole Lisbelle's man dared to boss them around. Before this, they had heard from Lady Kendall that Janesia was merely pretending to be Xavier's fiancée and had stolen him directly from her friend. So, they were only here to stall our heroine, allowing Lisbelle to go hunt down the second prince. The heroine remembered that Lady Kendall always coveted everything she had and would stop at nothing to get it. But this time, Janesia decided she would not let her get her way. She slammed her hand on the table, sending bottles flying and splashing wine everywhere. The use of magical items was prohibited at the event, which meant Meg and Selena were completely defenseless. She summoned a massive pillar of fire, aiming it at the spilled liquor, wanting those two women to get out of her sight immediately. Selena was terrified, unable to understand what had happened to the loser they used to know. Janesia felt they were quite alike, both played for fools by Lisbelle. But the heroine wouldn't be tricked again, while Meg and Selena remained her puppets. Not wanting to sit and wait for death, she blasted a stream of fire toward the two women. But the flame immediately extinguished, leaving the two girls completely stunned. Janesia could have easily taken them down with magic, but she didn't want to stoop to their level. As she left, she simply wanted to clarify that she had never spoken ill of them behind their backs. Meanwhile, Manuel leaned against a tree in the garden, utterly shocked by the scene he had witnessed at the banquet. Rupert walked up to him, wanting to confirm that His Highness was in the garden while Lady Limbrish was in the ladies' room. He knew the real reason for the male lead's low spirits was because of the heroine, But Manuel served the second prince, and he shouldn't covet what belonged to his master. However, the male lead didn't buy that at all, since Janesia didn't even like Kalian. Just then, the heroine suddenly rushed into the garden, catching the two men completely off guard. When she told them the second prince was in danger, they set off together to find him. Meanwhile, Kalian was meeting with his uncle, Richard, and rejecting his proposal. The Earl wanted to push his highness onto the throne, but the second prince only wanted to completely eradicate the royal family. He also realized that his uncle only wanted to use him for his own family's benefit. Richard pretended to genuinely want to help, reminding him that his highness's mother came from their family. Out of nowhere, Lizbel stepped out from behind a tree, her feet and the hem of her dress covered in mud. After politely greeting the two gentlemen, Lady Kendall swore she hadn't meant to eavesdrop on their conversation. This girl had changed completely. She didn't even look like the Lizbel Richard remembered, and he needed to know what she had heard. In truth, she hadn't heard anything, but the lady decided to pretend she had. She would keep her mouth shut, but only if Kalian agreed to see her occasionally. But the male lead just gave her a look of pure disgust, leaving her completely at a loss. She let out a nervous laugh, then explained that she just wanted to know more about her best friend. They had recently had a falling out, and Lizbel hoped His Highness could help them reconcile. Meanwhile, the protagonists were rushing to meet the second prince when Janesia accidentally hurt her leg. Suddenly, she saw Kalian looking displeased, with Lady Kendall following behind him. Lizbel saw the heroine and immediately concluded that Meg and Selena were useless idiots. She instantly began pretending that she had run into the second prince by chance, but Janesia wasn't buying it. Realizing things were spiraling out of control, the lady decided to squeeze out a tear, hoping everyone would sympathize with her and blame the heroine as usual. But to her surprise, Kalian walked straight to his fiancée, looking at her ankle with concern. Rupert and Manuel received orders to take them back to the palace, while Lizbel was terrified, unable to figure out why no one was even looking at her. The second prince suddenly scooped Janesia up into his arms and walked toward the carriage. He wanted to make it clear to Lady Kendall just how madly in love they were. Seeing the girl's anger, the heroine felt she wasn't worth wasting their time on. And in that moment, being held by the prince like that, she blushed furiously. The next day, Janesia was still replaying everything that happened yesterday in her mind. What startled her most was Kalian, and how he seemed far more invested in this relationship than she was. Sitting opposite her, Rupert clarified that the second prince wouldn't compete until the end of the tournament, so she could relax in the palace for now. Meanwhile, Xavier was furious about the drawing results, unable to understand how his father could let this happen. Before this, the Emperor had personally given him a magic amulet that could activate attack magic and enhance the user's strength. Despite this, the fourth prince never expected to be placed in the same round as Kalian during the draw. His right-hand man, Jade Wiseman, believed that since he was His Majesty's favorite son, his master should save his strength for the tournament. At the same time, the assistant was shocked by the immaturity and spoiled behavior Xavier displayed. Later, Janesia decided to go check out the tournament arena. When she saw on the brochure that the second prince and the fourth prince were in the same round, she was completely stunned. In her past life, they were also in the same group when the explosion happened, and she couldn't figure out how it could be happening again. It had been a massive explosion, and setting something like that up would require a complex magic rune and a powerful mana source. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice behind her, offering a helping hand to a young lady. It turned out to be Jade Wiseman, who was not only Xavier's right-hand man, but also a self-proclaimed baron and a swindler. Hearing that Janesia wanted to see the arena, he volunteered to give her a tour and helped her sneak into the stadium. As soon as they stepped into the arena, the girl began carefully inspecting the entire surroundings, which confused him. Suddenly, she discovered magic disruption stones under the flagstones, enough to trigger an explosion, but they still needed to find the magic rune. The guarding knights couldn't tolerate such disrespect and demanded they stop messing around. It turned out they were only able to get in thanks to Jade's connections, but they could be arrested for property damage. Walking outside, they heard angry shouts from arena fighters who couldn't understand how they had lost to a child. The boy responded that they were all just losers, which enraged the men even more. Lord Wiseman felt he should ignore it, but the heroine couldn't just sit by and watch. She walked straight up to the thugs, deciding to teach them a lesson and make them feel ashamed. The guys didn't want trouble with a noble lady, so they ran away, and then Janesia learned the child's name was Nia Nocturne. Looking at him closely, she suddenly realized this was the person who had taken second place in the tournament in her past life. Thinking he might have been frightened by the bullies, the heroine decided to walk him home. To thank her for the rescue, Nia decided to forgive her and quickly pointed out that he was a dragon hundreds of years older than her. After buying him some ice cream, she discovered that the hero was looking for his doll. The elders of the magic tower had promised to help him, but when they broke their oath, Nia cut ties with them. The heroine couldn't believe they would use a dragon like that for their own gain. She was the first person to help him without asking for anything in return, which was why the dragon decided to open up to her. Furthermore, Nia could see magic, and with just one look at Janesia, he knew she was a kind and very powerful wizard. Surprised by this ability, she hoped the dragon could help her find a rune in the arena. After getting his agreement, she took him to the Winter Palace, hoping they would let Nia stay there. Rupert's brother, who had just lost to the kid in a fight, was shocked by the whole situation. But the male lead himself was excited by the girl's appearance, as His Highness was eager to show off his skills for her. The second prince was very confused about how she had made friends with this guy. He let out a heavy sigh, feeling that she had forgotten about the tournament because she was having fun. Janesia thought he was upset because she hadn't fulfilled their agreement and decided to pay more attention from now on. The male lead was flustered by her words. He hadn't meant that at all. Suddenly, the dragon took a liking to the red-eyed prince, who just happened to be on the verge of death. Nia glimpsed something inside him and knew no normal person could live like that. Kalian stood up abruptly, drawing his sword, demanding to know how this child dared to say such things. But then he saw the look in the heroine's eyes, sheathed his sword, and decided they should have a proper talk. He understood that Janesia saw a lot of herself in the boy. She was just happy to chat with someone who loved magic as much as she did. Moreover, for the first time, she felt like she had a real friend. So, the second prince ordered a room to be prepared for him and decided that if Nia messed up, she would pay the price. Janesia was thrilled by what she heard, thanking Kalian and thinking he was truly a sweet person. The next day, she was alone with the dragon, hoping he could help her find the explosions. Activation device. Additionally, the heroine was curious about the thing inside the second prince that they had discussed yesterday. It turned out to be a stone made by the dragon Jorgen, which possessed healing powers. According to Nia, Kalian had died once, but this thing had brought him back to life. However, dragons didn't usually share their creations, so the male lead believed humans had stolen the stone. The doll he was looking for had been made by his mother and was also stolen. Back then, he didn't know much about humans, so he trusted the elders of the magic tower, but they deceived him. Now Janesia realized that in her past life, Jorgen had also used Nia to win the tournament. So this time, she decided to offer him protection and guaranteed he would get his doll back. Seeing that the heroine was different from other humans, the dragon agreed to her proposal. Afterward, they headed to the stadium, where the tournament was already in full swing. The VIP room was heavily guarded, and according to the guards, only members of the royal family could enter. Janesia was certain that as the second prince's fiancée, she had the right to enter. The guards at the door didn't believe it, but luckily, Jade suddenly walked out the door. Xavier's assistant confirmed this for the guards, hoping to be of help to the heroine. His hair and aura reminded the heroine of Lisbelle, whom she disliked. Nia rushed ahead, hoping to find the magical artifact she needed as quickly as possible. The dragon burst into the room and stopped in front of the emperor, pinching his nose due to a foul smell. Following closely behind, Janesia bowed respectfully to the son of the empire. His Majesty glanced at her indifferently, turned away, and continued watching the tournament. The girl was completely stunned. He looked even younger than the last time they met. Meanwhile, Nia could no longer suppress the urge to vomit his guts out. Magic was unique and diverse, just like human personalities. The dragon sensed the heroine's magic, warm as sunshine. Inside the emperor, all sorts of rotten magic were festering, and Nia was so overwhelmed by the stench that he wanted to throw up. Suddenly, they announced the start of the round Kalian was supposed to participate in. The male lead scanned the entire stadium and saw many contestants carrying items that could trigger an Explosion. There aren't many people who can mass-produce magical artifacts at once, so the second prince is definitely the target of the explosion. The dragon decided to ask, does she really like that red-eye guy? She thought he was referring to love in the broad sense, feeling that she cared for all her friends, him included. Nia noticed that she had searched every corner just to find a magic item for the prince. Is he really worth it? The heroine wanted to explain that they were bound by a contract, but why couldn't she bring herself to say it? The truth is, she wanted to stay with Kalian for as long as possible, even after the contract ended. He was the kindest person she knew, and he genuinely cared about her. The male lead didn't leave much of an impression on the dragon, but since Janesia valued him so highly, he agreed to help. Nia tapped the heroine's head with his finger, granting her the ability to see the world through dragon eyes and use dragon magic. Meanwhile, thanks to the stone he obtained, Xavier easily achieved a sweeping victory in the preliminaries. However, the item had a usage limit, so this male lead decided to save it for later. He saw Janesia on one of the balconies and immediately got excited, thinking she had come to watch him. Following her gaze, he was horrified to find that she was staring at Kalian. The second prince didn't understand why she was there, as it was still a long time before his match. Without warning, the fourth prince challenged him on the spot, saying that if he won, he would claim the heroine for himself. Kalian was furious. He was absolutely livid. Janesia was not a prize to be won, so he decided to teach Xavier how to respect women and accepted his challenge. The heroine stared in horror at the fourth prince's pendant, which was glowing brighter and brighter, infusing him with powerful energy. Xavier noticed her gaze and grinned, determined to win back Janesia and fulfill the king's orders. He launched a fierce attack on the second prince, but Kalian simply dodged calmly. Noticing that he kept clutching the pendant, Kalian realized his opponent was cheating. The heroine had heard from Nia that this very pendant would cause the magic stone to explode, but she knew it was a gift bestowed by the king himself, crafted by the mages in the tower. Meanwhile, Kalian grew tired of looking for openings and decided to end the battle. The fourth prince was already exhausted, knowing he was about to lose the match. So, naturally, he had to ask the male lead if he had noticed who the heroine had been staring at the whole time. Xavier believed she was still hung up on him and was only using the second prince to make him jealous. Besides, he recalled that Kalian wouldn't understand love even if it hit him in the face, because he had killed his own mother. In that instant, the male lead's sword slashed across him, tearing through his face and the stone behind him. The fourth prince trembled with pain and fear, hoping his half-brother wouldn't kill him in front of everyone. Looking at Janesia, Kalian knew they had a contract. Xavier's words shouldn't have stung him, but he was still burning inside. Suddenly, magic circles appeared everywhere, and the heroine leaped from the balcony, diving straight toward the second prince. As he caught her, he thought, wait, when exactly did I start having feelings for her? Immediately after, a massive explosion shook the entire place. The heroine used dragon magic to erect a barrier around them, keeping them safe. The earth absorbed all the magic power from Xavier's stone, and the explosion was even bigger than we imagined. Kalian looked at Janesia with sadness, thinking she shouldn't have risked her life like this just for a contract. She smiled back. Even without that damn contract, she would have protected him. A week passed, and by the Emperor's order, they stopped the search for the culprit and covered the whole thing up. Furthermore, since then, the male and female leads acted very awkwardly around each other. Meanwhile, Rupert met Nia and decided to give him a job. He handed him the money given by His Highness, and the dragon was in charge of taking Janesia out for a walk. Soon, they arrived at the center of a bustling market. Nia spotted a huge black tent and decided to check it out. It turned out this place belonged to a witch peddling potions. Before this, she had only heard of such things in books, so she felt this was a huge discovery. When she found that one of the bottles was a love potion, she knew she had to buy it. Another customer also wanted to buy it, but Janesia grabbed it first. Suddenly, the stranger recognized her. It turned out to be Lady Belawaz Tariq, Kalian's former fiancée. Later, the three of them sat in a cafe, and she recalled waking up one morning to find herself engaged to the second prince. Her father had sold her to win the Empress's trust, so she went directly to His Highness to make a deal. She handed over her father's secret ledger, and in return, Lady Tariq gained protection and the chance to break the engagement. She had been hiding at Rupert's place all this time, and met them just as she was preparing to leave Jiren today. Since things turned out this way, she hoped Janesia wouldn't refuse refuse to give her the love potion. The heroine had only taken it out of curiosity and didn't intend to use it on Kalian, so she readily agreed. But then Belawaz changed her mind, feeling that winning a man's heart was much more romantic than just drugging him. After that, she left, and the male and female leads returned to the Winter Palace. The second prince stopped her at the entrance, hoping Janesia could spare a moment. He remembered Xavier's words about her still having feelings for him. His Highness knew the fourth prince was just trying to provoke him, but he had still noticed the way the heroine looked at him. Now, he wanted to apologize for the things he had said about the contract earlier when he was emotional. Janesia remembered Belawaz saying she saw her rush toward the prince in the arena, and that such things are only done when in love. She smiled, gladly accepted his apology, and thanked him for the ring he gave her. Then, the Emperor's servant suddenly appeared, inviting Lady Lembrash to an audience with His Majesty. As she stood before the throne room doors, she felt a terrible, unfamiliar magic and a bone-chilling cold. Upon seeing her, the Emperor wanted to know exactly what kind of magic she had used in the arena. But His Majesty had learned from his ministers that it was impossible for a human to naturally generate that much magic power. Janesia stubbornly insisted that it was just a standard defensive spell, and as for anything strange, magic is inherently almost inexplicable, so well, it was just one of those things. After having the heroine sit on the sofa, the Emperor suddenly decided he liked her. He knew not everyone could do what she did, and he wanted to know if she could create a rune to turn back time. If she could, she would become His Majesty's personal magical advisor. The Emperor knew countless people were willing to serve him, but he didn't see that kind of ambition in Lady Lembrash's eyes. He felt this wasn't a problem, because her relationship with Kalian was just a contract anyway. Besides, the monarch knew the second prince wouldn't live much longer, so he thought she should dump him. Hearing this and recalling everything, she was convinced the Emperor was the mastermind. Just then, shouts from the guards came from the hallway, and Kalian burst into the throne room. Seeing this, His Majesty ordered the execution of all the soldiers guarding the entrance. The Emperor wanted the male lead to understand his place, as the lives of everyone around him depended on his actions. The second prince decided that Janesia was truly important to him, and furthermore, she was the only one who could send His Majesty back to the past. His father was completely stunned, thinking his son just wanted to show he wanted to be the heir. The Emperor chuckled to himself. He had previously thought he rushed to save the lady because he truly loved her. Discovering she was merely Kalian's business partner, the monarch let them both go and even decided to spare the guards. The second prince was very worried, but she knew he was lying to protect her. The male lead did indeed want to seize the throne and overthrow the current monarchy, but he didn't plan to use Janesia to achieve it. He had suspected it for a while, but after the explosion, Kalian knew that the person who had been trying to kill him all along was the Emperor. Now, the Empress would discover his plan to seize the throne, and a hunt for him and his team was about to begin. Rupert, Ash, Manuel, Aja, and all of His Highness's knights knew what they were about to face, but the heroine was different. Kalian didn't want her to become a target because of their fake relationship, but Janesia was determined to see it through and thought he should be happy. Not everyone gets the chance to recruit a talented mage like her. Around this time, Xavier began to wake up after receiving treatment. Jade was glad he at least survived, but the fourth prince felt his face was ruined and his life had become worthless. During the duel, he watched in horror as Kalian was suddenly distracted by the heroine. Recalling that moment, he turned and ran, saving his own skin. When the explosion occurred, he was lucky enough to be exactly within the range of Janesia's barrier. The healers treated his wounds, but unfortunately, that massive scar spanning half his face would remain forever. Lord Wiseman recalled the scene where the Emperor whipped him severely for messing up the plan. Before that, His Majesty had met with Kalian and the heroine, but she kept her mouth shut about the source of her magic. The Emperor knew the second prince had hated him since childhood and assumed he also wanted to turn back time. Now he needed Janesia, and if the Minister of Magic was right, she was close with Liz Bellkindle. Remembering his last encounter with the then young blonde lady, Lord Wiseman froze. She came from a family of mages who once lived in Avalentis, which was also where Jade was from. So the Emperor decided to assign this task to him, but the Lord would avoid meeting anyone from the Kindle family at all costs. They were the most powerful local family, marked by their blonde hair. Years ago, Jade and his family were their slaves. In the empire, social status was paramount. Slaves were treated like dirt. One day, the child brought food home and saw his mother was missing a leg. He turned to his little sister Ruby, knowing deep down it was likely her fault. It turned out Mom had promised her anything, and Ruby wanted one of Lady Lisbel's ribbons. Ruby felt it was her mom's fault for being too stupid and getting caught, which was why she lost a leg. After that, Jade immediately ran away, hoping never to encounter anyone from the Kendall family again. Then a great fire broke out. Only Lisbel survived. Mom and Ruby likely both perished in the flames. Meanwhile, Lady Kendall was about to go crazy because everyone was fawning over that ungrateful little girl. Lisbel decided she was the one who should be in the spotlight, without a doubt. Suddenly, she had a visitor from the Ministry of Magic. The girl thought it was Janesia coming to beg for forgiveness and rushed to the door. She opened the door full of hope, only to be shocked to see Lord Windsor standing there. Returning to the sofa, Lady Kendall wondered what he needed. The professor handed her a bouquet, feeling awkward. After all, this was his first romance. Lisbel didn't understand what he was talking about, remembering that she needed a letter of recommendation from him. Hearing that everyone was judging her, she cried to the Lord, hoping to gain his sympathy. She thought if he helped her transfer schools, maybe they could get to know each other better. And now, this male lead was before her, ready to turn any dream into reality. Then the girl remembered the secret Kesher auction, where a single invitation cost 20 million gold coins. She decided that if this lord loved her, they would go together, and he would buy her a necklace. Later, Rupert handed Janesia a package sent by her butler. Inside was a list of 105 wizards from the Magic Tower. She wanted to track down their leader. The Arthur Guild couldn't confirm his identity, so she decided to ask Nia for help. According to the dragon, the leader of the mages was Khan Singrir, who was as cunning as a fox. Janesia remembered that in her past life, he was also known as the swindler of the magic mines. Countless people invested in his projects, and he used their money to buy everything at the Kesher auction. To meet him, she discovered that Manuel's family had close ties with the auction organizers. After listening to his subordinates' report and learning of her intentions, the emperor couldn't understand why she needed intelligence on the Magic Tower. When he learned that she planned to move there after her contract ended, he realized that Janesia just wanted to live a quiet life. He also received intelligence that the White Knights might appear on the streets of Relsun, at the Magic Academy, and at the secret Kesher auction. Upon learning that the heroine would also be going there, the second prince decided to go personally. Leaving the office, Ms. Ash learned from Rupert that His Highness had feelings for Lady Lembrash. The male lead thought this was a problem because she would definitely become a liability, and he had persuaded Kalian to give up on revenge. But Ms. Ash thought this was actually a good thing, because the prince would do whatever it took to achieve his goals and protect her. Ash felt there was a special quality about her, something that could melt anyone's heart. Overhearing their conversation, Manuel was shocked to discover that Kalian had fallen in love with the heroine. A week later, he went to the auction with her. Janesia had no idea his family had such connections. The male lead's magic was inherited from his mother, while his father's family had always been powerful in the worlds of art and fashion. Thanks to their influence in society, the person in charge of the auction would welcome the Sieta family with open arms. The heroine realized she knew very little about Manuel, but according to him, they had only bumped into each other occasionally at the academy. But in Janesia's memory, they had never spoken. She had only watched him from afar. Then, the man decided to ask her if she remembered the local mongrel dog named Moku. She immediately remembered it and learned that he had adopted the dog. Moreover, thanks to that dog, they had met face-to-face for the first time. Back then, he saw her sitting with the dog in that place where he hid from everyone. After sharing some food with her, Manuel learned that she was already a senior student. At that time, everyone compared him to his brother, and he just wanted to disappear. Stroking the dog, Janesia felt that even though her life was a mess, she had never thought about ending it. She refused to give up and decided to love herself first. Her words touched him deeply, and he finally felt ready to talk to his family and clear the air. They soon arrived at the auction, but the people at the door asked to see there. Invitations. After he produced the invitation and they realized they were VIPs, they began to lead them through the hall. They walked for a while, and my God, this estate was much larger than it looked from the outside. Earlier, when he took out the invitation, she noticed he had a strange black and gold envelope. It was a family envelope, and she had a strange feeling she had seen it somewhere before. Manuel remembered sending her an invitation to the graduation ball in an envelope like that, but she never showed up. But Janesia was 100% certain she had never received any letter at all. He blamed himself for not handing it to her personally, feeling that he had completely ruined her graduation ball. Meanwhile, they finally arrived at the super-secret Kesher auction. Wearing that mask, she wasn't thinking about the graduation ball at all. She just wanted to know what had happened to that letter. In the hall, there were only 4 people besides the host. She quickly found a seat. The auction manager sincerely hoped everyone would find what they were looking for. The first lot, a vase made from the tusks of a magical creature, started at 100,000 gold coins. Bidders raised their paddles one after another, calling out prices. Janesia didn't want to buy anything. She just needed someone to know she was there. The final lot, a necklace set with the world's only black diamond, started at 2 million gold coins. Suddenly, a bidder who had been silent until then shouted a price of 3 million. She recognized him as the Magic Tower Master. He just wanted to launder money. Manuel felt she could bid whatever she wanted. His Highness the Prince had invested a huge sum in this auction. Kalian owned the largest magic stone mine in Jiren. So, yes, that guy was extremely rich. Janesia finally understood why he was so generous, but the male lead just thought she was special. Hearing the bids go higher and higher, she shouted 5 million, hoping to seal the deal. The Magic Tower Master began to drive up the price, competing with him. She didn't even notice the bid had reached 8 million. Suddenly, Lizbel fiercely shouted 20 million, and the lord beside her almost jumped in fright. They didn't have that much cash, but she knew that at this auction, one could also pay with organs. Since the professor had 2 eyes and 2 kidneys, she could totally sell him to pay for it. Janesia took off her mask, ordered her to stop using Lord Windsor, and paid for it out of her own pocket. Lady Kendall was completely stunned, wondering how on earth she had gotten in here. Seeing Lord Sieta beside her, she assumed the heroine had forced him to come along. Lizbel rushed toward the door, unable to wait to tell the second prince that Janesia was fooling around with someone else behind his back. But our heroine thought she shouldn't judge others by her own standards, and that the Lord shouldn't let himself be manipulated. Lady Kendall used people, and once they were of no use, she would discard them. Lizbel retorted, screaming at her, mocking how Janesia used to follow her around like a lost puppy. She also remembered someone had once stuffed a letter into our heroine's locker, inviting her to the graduation ball. Lady Kendall had always believed that what belonged to our heroine belonged to her, so she stole the letter and read it. Hearing her mock the ridiculous content of the letter, Manuel realized with horror that she was talking about the graduation ball invitation he had written. Lizbel thought it was sent by some loser and felt Janesia should thank her. As a result, our heroine punched her in the face. Stunned once again, Lady Kendall realized that no one had ever dared to lay a finger on her before. In a rage, she wanted to fight back, but the heroine calmly grabbed and stopped her hand. That letter was written by her dear friend, and Janesia hoped Lizbel would stop belittling other people's feelings. Lizbel pulled her hand away in annoyance, deciding to expose their secret affair later. Manuel had never imagined his feelings for the heroine would cause such trouble for His Highness the Prince. Janesia felt that people weren't as foolish as before and wouldn't blindly believe the nonsense she fabricated anymore. Lizbel was completely confused, not understanding when she had become so different. She sneered frantically. She was convinced that people didn't change and would always be. Blinded by rumors, Lady Kendall was sure that if she could fool Xavier, she could pull the same trick on Kalian. But Janesia had already fallen in love with the second prince and trusted him completely. Suddenly, the Magic Tower Master interrupted their conversation, saying the auction was over. It turned out the guy in the black cloak had bought the necklace for 200 million. Lizbel immediately started screaming at Lord Windsor, blaming everything on him. Hearing her insults, Kalian finally took off his mask and hood, thinking it was fitting for her to be with a bunch of sailors. While everyone was still in shock, he walked up to the heroine and handed her the spoils he had bought. It was the least he could do to thank her for her trust. Lady Kendall glanced at Manuel, saw an opportunity, and accused Janesia of betraying His Highness. The second prince was curious what nonsense she had made up this time, as he had known since the garden that she was full of lies. Offended by his sharp tone, she turned toward the exit. Kalian wondered who had given her permission to leave, but Lisbel knew this was just a petty squabble between her and the heroine, and he wouldn't do anything to her for it. But organ trafficking was another matter. If a royal mage was involved, it would be a public relations nightmare for the entire damn family. The prince realized the gravity of the situation, summoned the knights, and ordered them to arrest Lady Kendall and the others involved. Furious, she turned around and began pleading with Lord Windsor for help, blaming everything on his greed. The professor had no reaction, so Lisbel turned to Janesia, hoping her friend would support her. But the heroine thought this girl should have paid for her actions long ago. The lady gritted her teeth and swore to take revenge for this betrayal one day. After she left, Kalian felt it was too dangerous there and ordered the heroine to leave. He wanted to look around personally to see if he could find a secret underground passage. She decided to help him and discovered a magic orb nearby. She injected magic into it, and suddenly, Janesia saw a door begin to appear on the wall. Behind the door was a passage leading down, emitting the smell of magic, terrible and familiar. Walking down, the protagonist found a room piled with corpses, all with magic stones embedded in them. This meant the Emperor's power source was humans. How many people had he killed? Kalian wanted the heroine to leave, but she needed to figure out the situation. Later, as the sun rose, Janesia waited for the second prince to return at the Winter Palace. He finally returned that night, bringing news about the auction. A large number of people were involved in the experiments. He even had to put the Ministry of Magic on his suspect list. Janesia was certain the Emperor needed mages capable of creating magic stones to absorb energy. Everyone is born with a trace of magic, but it must be awakened to become a true mage. Very few can do it on their own. Usually, the help of parents or a mentor is required. This is why most mages are nobles. They have the resources for awakening and family. Knowledge. Almost no one can cast spells on their own, but with magic stones, even ordinary people can cause explosions. Most magic stones are mined, but they can also be obtained from the human body. The problem is the latter method is perfect for those who want to use magic illegally and keep a low profile. Janesia suspected the Emperor was behind it, but she couldn't figure out why he would do such a thing. Kalian knew his father's true wish was to achieve immortality. The investigation revealed that the Minister of Magic had found a wizard's diary, which detailed methods for immortality. Knowing it sounded crazy, the heroine hesitated whether to tell Kalian about her time travel. People she once trusted had betrayed her, but even so, Janesia decided to try trusting him. The heroine looked straight into his eyes and confessed that she could turn back time. But immortality cannot be achieved by going down this path. She began racking her brain, trying to explain this simply to someone who couldn't even cast a spell. But the second prince didn't need an explanation. He simply believed her. As long as she didn't mind, he wanted to know why she had time traveled in the first place. So, Janesia decided to tell him everything about Xavier and Lisbel betraying her, and how they almost burned her to death at the stake. Before this, Kalian thought she had come to him only because she didn't want to marry the fourth prince. But now he couldn't understand how Xavier dared to treat her like that. The heroine had returned for revenge, but when she saw the guards dragging Lady Kendall away, she felt only sadness. Holding her hand, the male lead thought Janesia had a kind, easily wounded heart, and what he liked most about her was that she remained kind no matter what. As time passed, the Emperor summoned the second prince to the palace war room. His Majesty knew he had only gone to buy a gift for his fiancée and happened to witness a crime. But he didn't believe that nonsense at all. Just then, Kalian remembered the sealed secret door he and the heroine had found in the dungeon. Back then, he had guessed it was a secret passage for the White Knights. They were the Emperor's own secret guard, lurking in the shadows, removing all obstacles in his path. Janesia couldn't break the seal on the door and thought maybe Nia could do better. The male lead didn't understand how a child could help, so she had to confess. He was actually a dragon. So now, knowing it was too early to confront His Majesty, the second prince decided to temporarily back down. He remembered that everyone involved in the auction had been arrested, but not yet interrogated. Kalian decided not to participate in the investigation, but he wanted a favor in exchange. He wanted to please the dragon and wanted the prize that should have belonged to the tournament champion. The emperor was completely confused. He thought Kalian's goal was the White Knights and those artificial magic stones. But did he really come to the auction just to buy a diamond for that little girl? But there was no time to think about it now. The emperor desperately needed those rejuvenation stones. Meanwhile, Janesia was waiting for her fiancé in the inner garden of the royal garden. Suddenly, she overheard several people talking about His Highness's cousin, Urian. Urian Shatanar approached Lady Lembrash. He believed that talking behind people's backs was a sign of insecurity. When Janesia was taking lessons to become the second prince's bride, she had learned that His Highness was related to the Shatanar family on his mother's side. Lord Richard Shatanar is the current Duke of Paladin, and Urian is his son and a cripple. Just then, Janesia was pleased to meet the prince's cousin. Just as they were thinking of him, they saw Kalian walking towards them. Urian smiled sincerely, hoping His Highness was well. The second prince's face darkened immediately as he scrutinized his cousin. Looking at his disabled leg, he realized that this hero had never truly recovered. Kalian decided to visit the Duke later, so he turned to leave and told Janesia to follow. She hurriedly caught up and quickly told Urian they would talk later. Meanwhile, Jade went to the palace dungeon on the Emperor's orders to speak with Lady Kendall. Knowing she would be executed soon anyway, he walked down obediently. Arriving at the designated floor, he heard Lisbel's annoyed voice, complaining that they dared to feed her such garbage. Seeing her pink hair, the hero was completely stunned, unable to believe his eyes. She glanced at him and immediately recognized Jade, her dear brother. He trembled in shock and confusion, unable to understand why Ruby would be here. She snapped at him to shut up, saying she was now Lisbel Kendall, the sole survivor of the great Aventus wizard family. She couldn't actually cast spells, but she used magic with the help of a borrowed family relic. Her brother began to despise her for her deception, but Ruby reminded him how he had abandoned her and Mom and ran away. Now, she wondered if he wanted to tell his new partners his true identity. In exchange for her secrecy, she wanted Jade to get her out. If he didn't do it, she would reveal the secrets of his past before she died. Because what they did to slaves posing as nobles was worse than death. The news spread like wildfire. Kalian locked up every scammer at the auction. Learning that the Emperor had pardoned some mages, many thought it was because they were nobles. Meanwhile, Ruby arrived safely at the second prince's estate. She told the guard at the gate that she was Lisbel Kendall, Lady Lembrash's best friend. After meeting in the drawing room, the heroine wondered why she even bothered to show up. Lady Kendall looked depressed. She wanted to apologize for her behavior at the auction. However, at the same time, she felt she had no choice. This was all started by Janesia. They used to be inseparable, but then the heroine became obsessed, first with Xavier, then Manuel, and now even Kalian. She turned her back on their friendship, and Lisbel became a mess because of it and started lashing out. Janesia was shocked by her conceit. She never thought this lady would disappoint her like that again. The girl also admitted that she obtained the pardon by pretending to study time travel with the heroine. Janesia remembered feeling guilty in the past for treating her friend that way. But now, she decided their friendship was over, completely over, forever over. The heroine believed friends should respect each other, but Lady Kendall always treated her like a servant. Lisbel couldn't believe she would say that, but Janesia just turned away in silence. Realizing she was being kicked out before finishing her tea, Lady Kendall thought the heroine was uneducated trash. So, Janesia poured the remaining tea from the pot directly onto her head, feeling that now that the tea was finished, the lady could leave in peace. The girl gritted her teeth, crying in humiliation, and swore to make her pay for this. When the heroine left, she met Kalian, who felt he should have gone to that meeting with her. But in any case, he thought she handled it well, and now he wanted to go get some pie with her. The Emperor executed everyone involved in the slave trade, but Lisbel somehow escaped. She was locked in the dungeon and couldn't see His Majesty, which meant someone passed a message for her. They needed someone to find out who that person was, and the second prince had just the right candidate. That night, Janesia went to the drawing room to await this guest's arrival. After opening the door, she froze in shock, seeing the man strangling Rupert and the servants, then greeting her cheerfully. He had been told the lady would repay the favor personally. This fool had waited so many nights, he cried himself to sleep. It turned out this stranger was Mirian, the guild master of the Adel Guild, personally hired by His Highness.